Deep in Ethiopia, a mountain long erased from human memory suddenly announced itself to the world with a massive eruption. Chapter 1. The Unexpected Eruption. November 23rd, 2025. Afar region, Ethiopia. The day started like any other, with people going about their daily activities as usual. Then, at exactly 11:30 a.m. local time, Haile Gubi Volcano detonated with explosive force, launching volcanic material nearly 10 miles skyward. Right away, that posed a danger, as it's the height where commercial airliners cruise. To add on to that, this was not just an ordinary volcanic event that tends to fly under the radar. It was the mountain's first documented eruption in roughly 12,000 years. Witnesses on the ground described the blast as something that resembled a massive bomb detonation. A terrifying moment when tranquility turned to chaos. And just when everyone thought that what shot into the atmosphere was just ash and smoke, they were in for a rude shock. Within hours, an invisible threat began racing across continents. This is after geologists discovered the eruption column contained microscopic fragments of glass, rock, and sulfur dioxide. Now, this is a deadly cocktail for modern aviation, as it could easily bring down aircraft flying thousands of feet above. The situation got worse after the plume started drifting northeast, thanks to high-altitude jet streams at speeds exceeding 60 miles per hour. This was the cue for aviation authorities across the Arabian Peninsula to start making critical decisions. By the morning of the 24th of November, the cloud had already crossed the Red Sea, swept over Yemen and Oman, and made its way right inside the Indian airspace. The response was immediate and drastic. India's aviation regulator issued urgent alerts directing carriers to avoid contaminated altitudes and inspect any aircraft that may have crossed through the affected zones. Air India grounded 11 flights over 2 days for mandatory safety checks, while Akasa Air suspended all services to Jeddah, Kuwait, and Abu Dhabi. Indian low-cost carrier Indigo also diverted planes mid-flight as ash warnings lit up cockpit instruments. Even KLM's Amsterdam-Delhi route went dark. One might ask, why such extreme measures? To answer that, think of the volcanic particles behaving like airborne sandpaper. That means they can easily frost windshields, jam sensors, and, most catastrophically, liquefy inside jet engines' combustion chambers, causing catastrophic shutdowns at cruising altitude. The fact that this plume was also traveling between 15,000 and 45,000 feet and directly intersecting the busiest commercial flight corridors connecting 3 continents made it pertinent to make these calls. And what might simply be the insidious challenge is the fact that aircraft weather radars cannot detect volcanic ash because the particles are too small to return radar echoes. Meanwhile, back in Ethiopia, a different crisis was unfolding. Villages surrounding the volcano disappeared under thick blankets of ash, transforming the landscape into a gray wasteland where livestock could no longer find edible vegetation. Local residents were not spared either. They battled respiratory problems as contaminated water supplies added to their struggles. Even tourists visiting the nearby Danakil Desert found themselves stranded in ash-covered Afdera, cut off as visibility dwindled to near zero and roads became impassable. So, what triggered Haile Gubi after 12,000 years of silence? The answer lies deep beneath Africa's surface, where forces have been secretly building for months. Chapter 2. The science behind the eruption. It now turns out that satellite radar systems had detected ground deformation and seismic swarms in the region months before the eruption. This was sufficient signal that magma was forcing its way through underground fractures. In the Afar region, the separation of tectonic plates over 30 million years has created extensive faulting and lithospheric stretching. In simple terms, Africa is tearing itself apart. Deep magma exploits every weakness in the crust, pushing upward from below while gravitational forces pull from above. In July 2025, earthquake swarms rattled the rift as molten rock traveled laterally through the crust in formations called dikes. These are essentially underground rivers of magma extending 9 to 12 miles. It is that continental rift that is pulling apart, and scientists have now confirmed that volcanic processes at work beneath the Ethiopian rift are nearly identical to those at the bottom of the world's oceans. Plainly put, this is more than just rifting. we are experiencing the birth of what could be a new ocean. The crust here measures just a few miles thick. As pressure mounted beneath Haile Gubi, the overlying rock finally surrendered, releasing energy accumulated over millennia in a single explosive moment. Now the question everyone's asking: could this affect the global climate? Volcanologist Simon Karn from Michigan Tech, a leading expert on volcanic gas emissions, has chimed in to answer that question. He notes that measurable climate impact typically requires an eruption to produce at least 5 to 10 million tons of sulfur dioxide. When sulfur dioxide reaches the stratosphere, atmospheric processes convert it into sulfate aerosols. These are suspended particles that reflect sunlight back into space, potentially causing planetary cooling. Current satellite monitoring suggests Haile Gubi's sulfur output remains well below those threshold levels. But scientists are not taking chances. They are tracking every measurement, modeling dispersion patterns, and watching for any sign that could point toward the eruption intensifying. This is based on findings that volcanoes collectively emit 20 to 25 million tons of sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere each year. Understanding all these will be vital in gaining a better idea on how this eruption could redefine climate patterns and the overall life of all those affected. So for now, the consensus holds. Unless a much larger explosive phase follows, global cooling remains largely unlikely. But the team has not stopped monitoring the entire process, because in volcanology, complacency can prove deadly. As we get deeper into this issue, this is the perfect time to subscribe to the channel if you are yet to. Doing so helps us grow and be better positioned to bring you these developments as soon as they happen. Chapter 3. Historical Context. But to understand what Haile Gubi might mean for our planet, we need to look backward, to eruptions that have already rewritten history. For example, in January 2022, the Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai volcano in the Pacific exploded with such force that its plume reached 35 miles into the lower mesosphere. This also made history as the highest volcanic eruption ever documented by satellites. This underwater eruption produced the largest global perturbation of stratospheric aerosols since Mount Pinatubo in 1991, and the largest stratospheric water vapor injection observed in the satellite era. The explosion also injected approximately 150 metric megatons of water vapor into the stratosphere, enough to raise global stratospheric water vapor levels by roughly 10%. Yet despite this unprecedented water injection, recent scientific assessments concluded the eruption had an overall net cooling effect on the southern hemisphere in 2022 and 2023. But to see what a truly catastrophic eruption looks like for human civilization, we need to travel even back, all the way to April 1815. Mount Tambora in Indonesia detonated in the largest volcanic eruption in recorded history, expelling approximately 35 cubic miles of ash, rock, and an estimated 60 megatons of sulfur into the atmosphere. The eruption reduced Earth's average global temperature by approximately 3 degrees Celsius and triggered what became infamously known as the Year Without a Summer in 1816. In May, frost killed crops across New York, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Vermont. In June, snow blanketed Albany and Maine. Lakes and rivers remained frozen into July as far south as northwestern Pennsylvania. That climate disruption alone resulted in the deaths of 90,000 people and lasted all the way through 1818, spawning cholera epidemics, mass starvation, and political upheaval across 3 continents. So, where does Haile Gubi fit into this historical framework? Climate experts stress that unless a dramatically larger explosive phase follows, something that would require sustained, massive outpouring of sulfur into the stratosphere, global climate disruption from this volcano remains unlikely. For now, the monitoring continues, satellite instruments track every measurement, and volcanologists remain vigilant. On the other side, travelers are rerouting flights while Ethiopian communities are rebuilding. And the question looming large is not whether another massive eruption will occur, it's when, and whether we will be ready when it does.